The FBI is now investigating sexual misconduct claims against Brett Kavanaugh, which has stalled his confirmation to the Supreme Court and divided American voters. So how are voters divided? We've got a new CBS News poll, and it finds that 35% of people support Kavanaugh's confirmation, while 37% want senators to vote against him. 28% believe it's too soon to say.
Rachel Mitchell, the outside counsel hired to question Christine Blasey Ford, tells Republicans on the Judiciary Committee that a he said, she said case is difficult to prove, but, quote, this case is even weaker than that. Major Garrett has more.
They have to have the ability to pursue the evidence. You look at
Judiciary Committee Democrat Amy Klobuchar warned the White House has tried to protect Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh by ordering a narrow investigation.
They cannot say, oh, hey, only interview the people in their neighborhood on one side of the street.
The FBI will not pursue allegations from Julie Swetnick that Kavanaugh was present at parties in the early 80s where women were given excessive amounts of alcohol and sexually assaulted. New transcripts show in an interview with the Judiciary Committee last week, Kavanaugh called Swetnick's allegations total BS. She's lying, Kavanaugh said.
The Swetnick thing is a joke. That is a farce.
A new front in the Kavanaugh saga, how truthful he was about his drinking habits in high school and college. The FBI may investigate that.
I did not drink beer to the point of blacking out.
A Yale College classmate of Kavanaugh's, Charles Chad Ludington, said Kavanaugh tried to deceive the Senate by downplaying his drinking habits. Ludington says on multiple occasions he saw Kavanaugh staggering from alcohol consumption. When Brett got drunk, he was often belligerent and aggressive. Ludington added he would take my information to the FBI.
They have free rein. They're going to do whatever they have to do, whatever it is they do.
On Sunday, lawyers for Christine Blasey Ford said she has not heard from the FBI. But the FBI did interview Deborah Ramirez, another Yale College classmate who told The New Yorker that during a drunken dorm room party in the early 80s, Kavanaugh thrust his penis in her face and caused her to touch it without her consent.
Well, Major Garrett joins us now from the White House. Major, Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton spoke about the FBI investigation on Face the Nation yesterday. We want to play a little bit of what he had to say, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
We already know what everyone who's alleged to be at the party has said. They've submitted statements or been interviewed under penalty of perjury. I would be shocked if any of them changed their statement under penalty of perjury to the FBI. But if this makes a few senators more comfortable about going forward and voting on Judge Kavanaugh's very highly qualified nomination in the face of an orchestrated Democratic smear campaign, then that may end up as a good thing.
So do we have any idea what the scope of the FBI's investigation is? And do we know if some Republicans are viewing it basically as a formality? Let's do this so we can vote and say, you know, we did our best to vet him, or if they're really taking this seriously as, you know, a formal investigation to determine whether or not perhaps a crime was committed.
So there are a lot of answers to those questions. Let's take the last question first. Some Republicans do view this as a mere formality. As Senator Cotton indicated, those senators don't, and they're all on the Republican side, don't expect any new revelations and only agreed to this, recommending it to the White House, and the White House only agreed to this next and newest FBI investigation because it didn't have the votes to confirm Judge Kavanaugh on the full Senate floor. They needed more time. They needed a better process to keep other Republicans, not including Senator Cotton, but including Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, possibly Jeff Flake of Arizona, and others on board. So they needed to take a pause. They didn't want to take a pause. If they could have voted this through over the weekend, I guarantee you the White House would have pushed for that. But the votes weren't there. So what do you do when the votes don't exist and your imperative is to win confirmation? You agree to a procedural delay, which is what they have agreed to. Now, when Jeff Flake, the Arizona senator who said all of this in dramatic motion of the Judiciary Committee on Friday, put this idea forward, he used the words limited in time and scope. There's going to be a clash over what defines limited in time and scope, but it's clear that the FBI's mandate is to look at the allegations so far leveled against Judge Kavanaugh, which may or may not include how much he drank in high school and college, and how truthful he was about that in his sworn testimony before the Judiciary Committee. But if at the end of this week, and there is an expectation here at the White House and on Capitol Hill that this FBI investigation will be concluded by the end of this week, Republicans in the Senate and this White House are going to be prepared to vote, and they're going to move on that initiative to try to have Brett Kavanaugh confirmed by Monday or Tuesday of next week.
Major, as you know, one of Brett Kavanaugh's former classmates at Yale says he was not being truthful about his drinking habits when he was in front of the Judiciary Committee. So what more do we know about Chad Ludington's claims? How helpful could they be to the FBI? And is it your understanding, Major, that they will or they will not look into those allegations, or at least to the concerns that people have about the questions raised with regards to his drinking habits in high school and in college?
So is this a legitimate issue for the FBI and the Judiciary Committee? Well, there's sworn testimony from Brett Kavanaugh that he never blacked out, and you could fairly read his sworn testimony as saying he never excessively drank to the point of not being fully coherent. Well, Charles Chad Ludington, a Yale classmate, said he was with Kavanaugh a lot, and he witnessed precisely that. Excessive drinking, not just beer, and belligerent behavior and aggression. Well, that would conflict with Judge Kavanaugh's sworn testimony. He, meaning Charles Chad Ludington, has said he will bring his information to the FBI. Just because you bring something to the FBI doesn't necessarily mean there will be an investigation. There could be. But if there are conflicting interpretations of Judge Kavanaugh's drinking habits, and there are, in addition to Charles Chad Ludington, there is another person, an NBA player, whose name momentarily escapes me, but I know you'll remember. Yes, Chris Dudley, who said, no, I was there at Yale, and I never saw that kind of behavior. So you have these dueling representations by supposed eyewitnesses of Kavanaugh's drinking habits at Yale who completely conflict with one another. How do you reconcile those two? It may prove, again, to be irreconcilable on the sexual assault charges and excessive drinking charges. And then what does this typically create? The same polarized superstructure that's been around the Kavanaugh hearings from the very beginning. Republicans pushing as hard as they can, even with a narrow margin, to achieve confirmation. Democrats raising as many questions as possible, trying to pick off one or two Republicans. And that's where these questions and the confirmation battle currently sits.
So we know before Friday the president was not interested in an FBI investigation, and then, to
put it mildly,
right, and then he, now it's happening, and he basically said, look, the FBI has free rein. But then over the weekend he was tweeting about Democrats that are only interested in obstruction and delay, and that they'll never be happy when they talk about problems with the time and scope. Well, they'll never be happy, the Democrats. Do we know exactly how the president is feeling right now as we're watching this, his nominee's confirmation be held up?
Well, he feels in a position of semi-powerlessness. He has nominated Brett Kavanaugh. He was given assurances by the Senate Republican leadership that the Kavanaugh confirmation process would be done and completed in time for Kavanaugh to take his position on the Supreme Court by today, the starting of the fall term, which begins the first Monday in October. Brett Kavanaugh's not there. That is, in its own sense, a defeat for the president and the White House. But as the president in his remarks Friday indicated, while the Jeff Flake drama was unfolding before the Judiciary Committee, he is reliant upon the advice he receives from the Senate Republican leadership. And when Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, leader of the Republicans in the Senate, with their narrow 51-49 majority, tells the White House, I don't have the votes, you've got to accept a seventh FBI investigation, the White House has no choice. Why? Because there's no backup plan. There is no alternative nominee. No one's been vetted. No one's been prepared. There is no process here at the White House to have a backup plan to Brett Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh is the plan. Kavanaugh is the imperative. And if there were a plan B, other White Houses might have already exercised it. This one does not. When President Trump makes a choice, he sees it through, no matter what the political backlash and no matter what the political peril. So he feels beset by difficulties unimaginable even 3 weeks ago, possibly even 2 weeks ago. But he remains confident that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell can see this through, that in the end, Republicans will find themselves comfortable with the full process, the additional FBI investigation, and when push comes to shove by the end of this week, the votes ultimately will be there, even though this has been, to put it mildly, a fraught, intensely partisan, and highly dramatic process, one the White House did not imagine, and one within its own dynamics has been almost as chaotic and unpredictable as this White House typically is.
Very good way of describing it. Major Garrett, thank you.